Welcome to our first virtual Power Hour. We're so excited to have you, our partners, here with us today, and we're really looking forward to hearing from our expert, Heather Henley, who is a certified feline training behavior specialist. Just to tell you a little bit about her professional relationship with animals started 14 years ago at a shelter in South Carolina. She's been working with cat behavior and enrichment in shelters for over 10 years. So we are so grateful to have her with us today, to take time out of her day. She currently is in Cat World at the Best Friends Animal Sanctuary. So she's taking time out of her day to share her expertise with us. We're really grateful for those also who took time to submit questions in advance from our digital community. So just to set a couple of housekeeping things, we're going to have her proactively share information with you, and she'll pause periodically because we really do want you to ask questions. The place that you'll ask those questions is in the bottom chat area, and we have two facilitators, myself and Rhea Greenbaum, who will help make sure that those questions get facilitated to Heather. At any time, you can submit those questions and we'll make sure those are risen to the top. And then at the end, if we need to do a follow-up, if there are any questions we didn't quite get to, we'll make sure to follow up via email. So I'd like to let Heather have the remainder of the time, and you on the call as well. Since this is live, we really would love to have it be as interactive as possible and hear from you. We'll get started. Heather Henley, take it away.
Hi, everybody. So as you said, my name is Heather Henley, and I'm here in Kanab, Utah. And sorry, something popped up on my computer. And we are going to be talking about cat behavior and enrichment this morning. So we'll go ahead and get started with slide 1. We are actually going to talk about stress in cats. And to give an overview of stress, stress is physical, mental, or emotional strain or tension in response to intense or prolonged aversive stimuli. It can occur in any situation that makes the animal feel frustrated, fearful, or anxious. So what did I just describe? But your typical day at a shelter for people and for animals. So coming into it, as y'all know, working in shelters, it's already a stressful place. The next slide shows signs of stress in cats. You're going to see hiding, not eating, depression, feigned sleep, social withdrawal, lack of grooming, dilated pupils, hypervigilance. I'm sure you are all familiar with these. It also talks about piloerection, and that is just the involuntary erection or bristling of the hairs due to reflexes, and it's usually triggered by cold, shock, fright, and it's just started by the nervous system. And part of that, it's the part of the nervous system that is responsible for many of the fight or flight responses that you're going to see in cats. However, I will add, always check to make sure there's not a draft on them. I learned that at the shelter I was at. We had a hard time reading one of the cats, and it turns out the vent above him, the cover came off, so he had constant airflow on him. So that actually, once we fixed that, that changed the life for that cat. So be mindful of things like that. Our next slide talks about cat behavior and enrichment, and this is also just showing a picture of Aurora Sky. Isn't she beautiful? So this is a nervous, frightened kitty. Notice her pupils are very dilated. There's no eye contact. Her ears are turned slightly back. And actually you can't so much tell from the picture, but she is crammed in a very small space, and she kept turning away from people and trying to escape. With the turning away and the fight or flight response, please always remember that if they are in a small space and you keep coming towards them, if flight is no longer an option, fight is. So safety first, please. Our next slide just is going to talk about enrichment. Enrichment is a process for improving the environment and the behavioral care of confined animals within the context of their behavioral needs. So enrichment for dogs versus cats are going to be two entirely different things. Enrichment also focuses on reducing an animal's stress level and improving their emotional well-being, strengthening their resilience and adaptation to the shelter environment. You know, animals coming in from homes to the shelter, that's a big change. Even ones who are trapped coming in off the street, it's still a change. And even if they're safe now, good stress, bad stress, stress is stress. So in their first few days, you're really going to see them go through some stressful times. Enrichment is also the foundation for the psychological health during their shelter stay. And the purpose of enrichment is going to be to reduce their stress and improve their well-being by providing physical and mental stimulation. A lot of times it's easy to think of the physical, especially like with dogs, like, okay, we have to go get them out for walks. With cats, it's actually a not so newer thing for people who know and love cats. But if you notice, it's a newer thing overall in the animal welfare business because it just wasn't presented as often. So, you know, you have a lot of shelters still with volunteer programs that actually don't even mention cats in it. So that's actually one of the first tips I'll say is have volunteers work with cats. And it's, so another thing is for their environment is, you know, provide scratching, things like that. And enrichment is actually based on the animal rights, the 5 freedoms, and this is where the guidelines for standards of care in animal shelters, this is what they were based on. So for one, you have freedom from hunger and thirst. For this is by having ready, accessible access to fresh water and a diet to maintain full health and vigor. The second freedom is freedom from discomfort. You want to provide an appropriate environment, including shelter and a comfortable resting area. 3 is freedom from pain, injury, or disease. And this is by preventing or also by rapidly diagnosing and treating any injury or disease they may have. 4 is freedom to express normal behavior. So for this, you're providing sufficient space, proper facilities, and the company of animals of their own kind. Now, in regards to company of their own kind, I understand coming into shelters, you can't always mix and match right away due to disease control. So you do kind of want to house them together. And if possible, have dogs as far away from cats as you can. Coming from a shelter, that was very hard for us. So I understand there's going to be issues that you'll have to face with that. And number 5 is freedom from fear and distress. And that's by ensuring conditions and treatment which avoid mental suffering. And having a robust enrichment program is a very important tool for supporting all 5 of these freedoms. And it actually very directly impacts 3 of these 5. We're going to briefly touch on enrichment versus behavior modification because for some people these tend to either get not confused, but either you kind of use one and you should be meaning the other one. So enrichment actually focuses on reducing the animal's stress level and increasing their emotional well-being. It strengthens the animal's resilience and, you know, helps them get used to the shelter environment, as we said before. Whereas behavior modification is actually the process of changing an animal's behavior. So you're working on problematic behavior that they have developed or are showing you. So while enrichment works towards alleviating stress and the development of the problematic behavior, a behavior modification program actually works towards alternating their behavior. Behavior modification actually can be and is often resource intensive. So while we're very fortunate here at Best Friends to be able to do things like that with some of the harder cases, in your typical shelter, we understand that's not necessarily as possible. Because it is quite resource intensive and it can require staff with a specialized skill set. So So basically, enrichment is prevention of developing these behaviors. So this is Slidell in her box. Slidell actually, well, she slides. She was born with a birth defect and her back legs do not work. She came to us as a kitten and actually gave us quite a fright. We couldn't find her for about 30 minutes one day, and she was under a shelf that we just couldn't see her. So after we found her and hugged her for about an hour, we rolled up some rugs and stuffed it under there so she couldn't get back under there. So we provided her with safer hiding spots. And actually, if I'd used the one from Valentine's Day, it was actually a kissing booth where people would give her treats. And she was like, this is great. I love it. Whereas on the other end, behavior modification is treatment. So this guy, not very happy with us at the time. He was very under-socialized. He was not truly feral. We don't have any truly feral cats here because we feel that, you know, these are cats that aren't going to be happy. We are causing them pain by making them come inside. So while we do have under-socialized cats, we do not have any true ferals that live inside. We do TNR those guys. So with this cat, we actually had a behavior modification program in place to help him get used to people, and he's actually much better now. So next, we are going to just touch on some different things on enrichment. It is more than mental health. It does decrease the stress in the animals while they're at the shelter, which decreases the rate of illness and increases the animal's adaptability. Stress is, as y'all know, the #1 reason for upper respiratory infections in shelter cats, and that is one of the biggest issues that I know y'all face. Because once they get sick, there's just things you have to do. It also gives them life skills that are going to help them stay in their home. For the ones coming in who weren't in a home before, you know, this may be the first time they're inside for any amount of time. So it's kind of like, well, I need to know how to act in here. For example, we have this awesome cat named Lightfoot who came to us from Philadelphia as a community cat there. However, due to allergies, he couldn't go back there. He was highly allergic to a lot of food, so he looked like a burn victim when he got here. He was so scratched up. So we got him patched up from that, and now he is one of our, I'm not gonna lie, he's so smart. So he is the reason we have baby locks on all of our food cabinets. And he has to go outside for walks every day because for him, he is so used to constant stimulation coming in from outside that when he gets bored, he either eats, because I know when I'm hungry, I'm like, you know, should I have a sandwich or am I just bored? And, you know, I have the sandwich just in case it's actually hunger. But for him, he also, you know, he needs stimulation. And living in a building where he's a single cat, so we have play groups with him. But for him, we've noticed that we have to give him a little more in different ways than other cats. And he was actually adopted once and came back, and he, I'm not gonna lie, had horrible table manners. When he came back, we decided we're gonna have lunch with him, and I took a bite of pasta, and he proceeded to take it right out my mouth. And of course, I'm laughing so hard that I let him because I wasn't expecting that. But after that, I'm like, okay, so we can work with this. A few months later, with some, you know, starts and some backward steps, he actually is very, very well now with food. He will sit by me, and he will even, if he really wants it, may lay his head on my arm, but there's no more reaching into my mouth, taking his bite back. Enrichment programs are also going to help you boost staff and volunteer morale. Because for so long, enrichment was seen as an added thing that to do if you had time, whereas now it's more mainstream to actually fit it into your daily cleaning routine. You know, as you feed them, maybe don't give them a bowl, but give them several bowls that they have to then kind of walk around for. That's actually one of our big things for overweight kitties, is instead of just having a big bowl that they can sit in front of eat, it's a lot of little bowls throughout the room, so they can only have so many bites and then they have to go find it. Also, a cat who's going to come them to the front of the cage to interact with people has a higher chance of adoption than one who is cowering in the back. Now, however, there are those people that want those shy cats, and I love them dearly. But your regularly Joe public is kind of looking for the ones who are already interacting. And we'll talk later about great ways to get them to the front of the cage, such as treats and clicker training and things like that. Studies also show that people are going to stop to peek in a cage that has toys in it. Even if the cats are asleep and aren't playing with them, they see it, so there's like, oh, is somebody in there, over the ones that don't have anything. Even because with some of the cages, you know, they can get kind of dark, and I know lighting's not always the best. And so if you do your placement right, you know, put the kittens kind of in the hard to reach places, because as you know, kittens are going to get adopted. And maybe the kind of shy kid who's really nice, kind of have them front and center. And then put toys in there. We had a black cat who we added a very colorful blanket so people could see him, and he's like, all right. Another thing we did was soft paws on some of our black cats. Like, I'm talking hot pink and purple, and ones they could see, so it actually drew their eye to that. So we actually used it for a number of things. A, to get these black cats seen, because as you know, their adoption rates are just not as high. And also it opened us up to discussing soft paws versus declawing. So many things that you can do are going to have, you know, more than one outlook. And also an enrichment program can bring in donations and sponsorships. So at the shelter I was in, I actually had a budget of $0. So I know that's what a lot of y'all are working with, to maybe, you know, a few hundred. It's going to change for everybody. So one of the things I do want to talk about is enrichment on a budget, or enrichment on a lack of a budget. So anything we did get for the first few months, I actually, some people at the shelter, we kind of just all pulled together, and then we went from there. I will say, for dogs, contact your local country clubs, because they will save their tennis balls for you. Also, they will save their wine corks. Just make sure you fully wash them before giving them to the cat. Also, an enrichment program is going to establish your shelter as a credible source for problem solving on behavior and training issues. It's going to also open up the door for people coming in to relinquish their pets, and you can start talking about, like, hey, you know, why, and then once they, you know, if they have a problem, you can help them with that. And one thing I would like to iterate is, for the shy cats in the cages, you know, make sure they have hidey holes. If there's no room for like a hiding place in there, you can always put a towel in front of the cage. And some people say, you know, well, they're not seen, so they're not adopted as fast, but it's actually they adapt quicker and are adopted faster, because when they're in a constant state of arousal and just being frightened, they have no way to calm down except at possibly nighttime, and then they're just amped right back up the other day. But if you give them the safe place to hide, then they will actually come around much, much quicker. Okay, so some general tips is safety first. Safety first for people and animals. Because if people keep getting injured, then it's possible that people are going to be like, okay, no, we can't do this anymore. Also be aware that reducing stimulation can be just as important as increasing it. It depends on the type of stimulation. It depends on the cat. It depends on so many things. So while I would love to say, okay, here's you a handout and this is the protocol you follow, it's more like we're pirates, and I'm going to give you guidelines because it's going to change based on your situation, based on the cat, based on a couple of different things. So we're going to set you up with guidelines to go through. And if at any time you have questions later, my email will be at the end. Please do not hesitate to contact. If I can't answer it, I will direct you to somebody who will, or if you would like a different point of view, whatever, we'll get it answered for you. Also consider individual preferences. For example, this is TJ. TJ really liked his chair. That was actually the bed he used. That's everything. So when somebody took it out because they sat in it and it broke, that caused some stress for TJ. So it's okay, we got him another one. But stress and fear differ from cat to cat. And also, whereas we're fortunate to have, you know, larger rooms, we're also aware that not everybody does. And in cages, you're going to want to look at it through each cage to see, you know, okay, is this something? Because if you just look at it through one cage, you're going to see, you know, that's going to differ from the one that's 3 banks over. Provide variety. We have a cat who loves ping pong balls, loves them. But we do rotate his toys out just to make sure he doesn't get too, you know, too used to them and then starts ignoring them. We actually rotate toys out every day. There's a few in each room that we keep, but then we like to provide a variety. They're washed, and then we put them in actually bags with catnip. I will say make sure they're fully dry first, or you're going to have a mold problem and you have to throw all these toys out. And I'm not going to lie, as a hoarder, well, that has negative connotation. As a purveyor of cat toys, it breaks my heart when I have to do that. So, and then we just soak them in catnip, and it kind of rejuvenates them, and it's like, oh, brand new toy. And we do it every day, or at least every other day, because after about 3 days, they tend to not notice them anymore, with the exception of kittens. And, you know, if a breeze comes through and blows a bug, it's like, oh no, best thing ever. Also, keep it positive. We do everything positively here, as I know y'all would like to as well, or as y'all do too. So that's just one of the main things. So some of the basics are, this is going to start at intake. You know, when you bring them in, you're going to, you know, provide them with the bed, you know, their basics, litter box, fresh food, water, you know, throw a toy in there. And it could be something simple like a, oh God, I can't remember what they're called, but you use them in crafts. They're little pipe cleaners, thank you. And just wind it up in a spring, and best toy ever. Also on vinegar, when you take the strip off, there's 5 of those floating around in one of my buildings right now because best toy ever. Also remember that it is somewhat structured, but have room for flexibility and individuality. So this is Vladimir. He was one of our FEALV positive kitties. So he was 4 when this picture was taken, and we ended up losing him the next year, but we got a stroller donated. And at first, I'm not going to lie, us caregivers were a little apprehensive. We didn't think they were going to think it was all that. We were proven so wrong that we actually have a little stroller trail now away from the road because we have so many cats that love it. We also do harness walks. So for some of those where that's an option, that is great. I have some resources later on that talk about how to get it started. And for us, we have a wish list on Amazon that's very specific, because we have found when you are specific with people about what you want, and it's easier for them to buy it, then the more they will get. Whereas opposed to when I first started at the shelter and we were like, hey, we need cat food, you know, people would bring in like 1 or 2 bags because they were like, I wasn't sure what kind you needed. Once we started saying, hey, we need this brand and this kind, people, you know, were bringing in so much more because they weren't questioning, oh my gosh, is this right? Because if it's not, it's just going to go to waste. The same is true of other items of importance. This is actually from Amazon, the stroller. So, and Vladimir was a big fan. He did not like harness walks because, well, he was a tiny little guy and they annoyed him. And he said, why walk when you can be pushed? So for him, the strollers were where it was at. So some requirements for your enrichment is always make sure they have a comfortable resting area, hiding spot. For cats, a scratching surface. So many of our behavior problems that are relinquished to us are because, you know, they're like, well, they scratched the sofa, but once we find out, oh, you don't have any scratching posts. So, so there's that. And then there's at least 1 toy rotated daily. And daily social interaction. We aim for 15 minutes. Now, I also know that, you know, when you're at home with your 4 cats, oh yeah, 15 minutes a cat, that's no big deal. But when it's you and 20 cages, and I'm being generous, I know it's usually more, and you also have to clean and help volunteers and do medical, that, you know, you are already feeling rushed. So volunteers are great, you know, use and don't abuse them, but we do aim for 15 minutes daily. We also keep track. We have a board so we know who was done. So if anybody was skipped that day, we can start with them the next day. Another thing to do, I know for places with cages, is they have little buttons and they can rotate it, like, yes, I've had my attention already, or no, I haven't, please spend 15 minutes with me. Another important one is daily sensory enrichment. And so many people can get caught up in, oh no, here's toys, that you forget, oh my gosh, let me do everything. I am a big fan of bubbles and bubble blowers in front of cages. You can even get Nerf guns. Not gonna lie, I had a lot of fun with my nephews one day, and shoot them in front of cages. You can do clicker training with individual cages. I'm actually gonna show you how to do that later. Daily mental stimulation, physical stimulation. When they're in cages, if you have the option to set up an area for like your long-term residents, because again, I understand disease control, you can't have a cat who just came in and mixing, and you have to have time to clean and everything. So set up an area. And for us, when we were in Texas for hurricane relief, we actually had pre-ferts. And some of the guys actually built us some for the cats with, and used the panels as the roof. So once the cats who had been there, and it wasn't cats coming in every so often, and it was past the emergency, oh my gosh, we have to get everybody in and safe, to, okay, we have breathers now. They were able to have out of cage time, which really helped for some of the longer term residents. While we were down there, we also became aware of a hoarding situation. So we got 100 cats at one time. And, you know, y'all see that all the time. And some of these cats are coming in with no knowledge of a bed or, you know, their own space. So we had one little girl who was, we put her at about 13. She had some neurological issues. She was blind and deaf. We think she could see shadows, so she wasn't totally blind, but for the most part, and she had been an outside cat her whole life. So we were, you know, trying to touch her, and she's like, y'all have got to be kidding me. So we actually had a carpet remnant. We put some catnip on it and put it in there with her. And literally 2 minutes later, when we walked by, she is on her back acting like a kitten. And it was so nice to see this cat who had never had this just enjoy it, even in the middle of all of these barking dogs, all of this stressful that she just went through, being trapped and being, you know, she had had a rough day. But to see her acting like a kitten just warmed my heart. Then later we gave her a red bed that ended up having to go with her because she was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. She had never had a bed before. So when she left to go to Colorado, it went into the carrier with her. So also exposure to enjoyable novelty. So I'm going to show you this video of Eli. We have a wonderful lady who makes homemade cat toys and sends them to us. And this is Eli finding the box of them. I love him.
He's looking for just the right one, right, Heather?
Yes, he is. And it's so funny because he does find it, but I had turned the camera off. And then he ended up laying in it for about 10 minutes, and we're like, that's fine. Oh. There we go. So, and I also found, so when I was in the shelter and not so much at the sanctuary, we had she actually turned 92 the year I left, and she could run circles around me, but she couldn't do as much. Through the years, I had to stop letting her walk some of the bigger dogs, but she actually started a sewing circle there, and they would homemade cat toys, they would knit beds, and they loved having stuff to do. So we also extended it to where we had therapy dogs go out and see them. So that was great. So we developed a bond with several of our local nursing homes, and it got some of the pets out and seen, and then they were also able to help us with toys. And here we actually had a lady with a walker who, on her birthday, her daughter brought her, and she wanted a cat, but her cat had always sat and rode on the walker in the morning, and she wanted a cat that did that. And we had one who jumped right up and was like, "Yep, it's me." So some potential benefits from your enrichment program are going to be reduction of stress, of behavioral deterioration, reduce of illness, reduction of their length of stay, so you're able to save more, and your turnover is going to be higher. They're going to present better for adoptions. You're going to have more engaged and observant workforce and volunteers, and overall an improvement of quality of life. When I was humane educator, I used to explain it to the kids that, so you got grounded and you had to go to your room for 2 weeks. The first week was awesome because, man, you had all these great Nintendo games and you were just having so much fun. And then after you beat them all, you're kind of like, well, this is not fun anymore. So with these guys, same thing, and they live in the now. Whereas if we have a bad week, we're like, okay, next week will be better. For these guys, they live in the now. So we need to make sure mentally they're okay longer in shelter environments, because it's not ideal. We want them in homes, of course, but with enrichment programs, you can keep them happier in shelters longer and give them more of a chance to be adopted. So this is Sherlock and his friend. These are also some of our leukemia kids, and they love each other. Look at how great they are. God, I love those. So we're also going to touch on some harness walking right now. Let me pull up. Okay. So this is actually an intern and one of our cats named Toulouse. So if you'll notice, you could see he was a little nervous at first, but as compared to when he first started walking, that was a big deal. So the harness walks also helped with his confidence level. He actually came to us from a shelter in nearby St. George. He lived with other cats, but when you stopped petting him, he would reach out and grab you because he was like, well, you weren't done. And of course, it's cute. So you go back to petting him. Well, then it was turning into he used claws, and then he was nipping, and he was on his way to being a bite case because he never had a chance to decompress while living with these multiple other cats. So when he came here, we actually housed him in his own room, and we gave him a few days to settle in. Like you do at the shelter before trying to test if they're truly feral or under-socialized, you have to give them a chance to calm down. And maybe you don't have days, but you don't want to do it right when they first come in because, they were just in a trap, and then they had to travel, and their whole day has just been messed up. So for him, after about a week, we were able to start working with him and helping with his confidence so he wasn't so nippy. And he's one that loves to jump on your shoulders. So that's a thing. So we actually clicker trained him. When we pat our chest, he jumps right up. So clicker training for him is important because he's only 4 and he has a lot of energy. And he is also one of those super intelligent cats. So I had a trainer once tell me that she was too tired to adopt smart animals, that she needed the ones who weren't so smart because they were more couch potatoes, whereas the smart ones, you really have to keep them engaged because they're like toddlers. You have your 2-year-old, he goes quiet for half an hour and you get a little concerned and there's your crayons on your living room wall. some of the cats are like little chainsaws on your living room wall, so you want to make sure that they're okay. And I was going to pause real quick to see if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, I wanted to also make sure that people know on your webinar panel, you'll see attendee list, but you'll see an area that says questions with an arrow next to it. So if you click on the arrow, it turns the arrow downward and opens up a field for you to be able to type questions as we're going along. So feel free to utilize that option for us to be able to share any questions with Heather. Heather, I know you had one and you might be getting to this, and so if I'm jumping ahead, don't feel like you have to answer it right now, but I know there was a question about some strategies for specifically socializing semi-feral cats in a shelter environment. So maybe you are planning to already talk to that, but just wanted to bring that one up as a advanced question that had already come in.
Yes, so I'm actually going to skip ahead just a few slides. And let's go ahead and talk about that since I kind of already opened the door for it. Let's see. There we go. So we're going to talk some socialization tips. And I will relate them more so towards shelter because shelter environments are going to be different than our sanctuary environment. So when you're first starting with your under-socialized kids, and I say under-socialized as opposed to feral, because for us, if they are truly feral, if we have tested them when they came in, we understand it's going to be hellacious for them to actually live inside in such proximity to people. So if that's the case, we will release them back into their colony. If they can't go back to the same place, we do have a couple of colonies available to us in town that we're able to kind of merge them with. And that can be a whole other presentation. And if anybody would like further information on that, like I said, I'll have my email and I will be happy to share that with you. That is one of the things I'm very passionate about is TNR and keeping the ones who aren't going to be adoptable in the shelter out of the shelter. And that way it leaves space for the adoptable ones. Patience is going to be your first virtue. And it's going to be so important because you're going to have days where you feel like you're just going backwards and backwards, and then you're going to have like a breakthrough, and it's not going to happen all at once. And when we have volunteers, not all of our volunteers are local, so I do try to tell people like, look, I know that you're not necessarily going to see a breakthrough right now, but this cat compared to 3 weeks ago, there's been big steps, and I see it. The other cats see it. But being here briefly, you may not. However, in shelters where hopefully your volunteers are actually more, I don't want to say steady, but because we're rural and people travel to us, it's going to be a different setup. So you can actually have we call them not sponsor kitties, and they pick kind of a cat they have a special bond with or just they're kind of drawn to, and they work a lot with that cat. And they call them their project cat. But patience, again, is a virtue. Knowing their history can help, medical, things like that. With the history, it's important just to know maybe the background. Are they from a colony? Are they from a hoarded situation? Are they from a home? Because depending on where they came from, some of the socialization activities may or may not work as well. For example, a cat who has never been around humans is going to need time to get used to our presence before we even begin to think, oh, hey, let me pet you. Whereas a cat in a home is like, oh my gosh, hold me now. And then, we don't force socialization here. Force has, you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to pick you up and pet you till you like it. A, I like my eyes where they are. B, if you do that with a cat, they're either going to shut down, or if they do just learn to live with it, the first time you have to do something, say medical to them, even if it's nothing horrible, they will revert back, and you're going to have to build that trust up again. And it wasn't so much trust in the first place. You were forcing your attentions on them. What we do is we bribe. I'm not going to lie. Baby food and temptations go a long way. And that way, when you're working with these shy cats, it's their choice. You're giving them that option, because when you're in a shelter, you have so many of your choices taken away from you. You get fed when we feed you. You get this blanket because I gave it to you. So for these shy cats, giving some of their control back, you notice a big difference. Also, the flight versus fight. When you reach in for a scared cat, if it comes to the point of they can't get away and you're insisting, they will turn to scratch or bite. So it's a safety issue as well. So I also have a presentation on body language I will be happy to send to people. It's just a quick webinar, and it has different pictures and things for you to share over body language in cats. Remember to let them be a cat. Let them come to you. We have a cat named Dash who, out of all the cats here, he's probably the most under-socialized. And we got him when he was a little older, but due to health issues, he couldn't go back outside. So we thought we would give it a shot. And if he was truly unhappy, then decisions were going to have to be made. But he's in a smaller room. So, and we just let him be himself. We don't force socialization. When we have to do medical, we do push it, but we also sedate him in the room. Again, this is something we're able to do. I know shelters are different, and so this kind of story may not help you as much. But with him, it's a few years later, and 2 months ago when he licked baby food off my hands, I'm not going to lie, I stayed calm in the room, but as soon as I left, I have like happy tears running. He didn't need to see all that though. So your body language and your energy is just as important when reacting to them, because if you go in kind of nervous and unsure of yourself, they pick up on that. And some of them are just going to be like, well, I don't want to have anything to do with you. And you're going to have some on the other end of the spectrum who, for instance, we have a cat named Lux, and if you walk into his room nervous, he picks up on it, and he's like, well, obviously I was fine until you came in, you're nervous, so you're the problem, and he goes after feet. So again, it's going to vary cat to cat. So make sure the people who are helping you with this are up on cat body language. And then feral versus terrified tame. Later, we will get into some slides that talk about like differences so you can tell. And I know you don't always have enough time to let them settle down before you need to know, because I know, if you have all these cats coming in and you have all of this going on and you have two people, it can be hard. So we want to be here to help you with that. And we have people also coming from the shelter environment so they understand the issues you face, whereas that we don't necessarily face here at the sanctuary. So this actually talks about the caregiver body language. Avoid prolonged eye contact. Make your voice quiet and soothing. When working with cats, their hearing is so much better than ours. So keep everything kind of light. Cats are predators, but they're also prey animals. So there is that working with them. So you kind of have to remember that. So you don't want to always constantly look them in the eye. We have the I love you blink, which is the slow blink, and we glance at them, and as your eyes are open, you say I, and then you close them, love, and that's just kind of quick, and then you look away. And that way you're not just forcing yourself onto the cats. And remember to relax yourself. Are your jaws tense? Are your shoulders tense? And just kind of let it kind of take a deep breath. So here's some of our body language signs. This guy is a little nervous and weary. You see him licking his lips repeatedly. He's showing very little tongue. His pupils aren't dilated, and he will make eye contact, but he looks away. Now, he's not so much afraid, but he is kind of checking you out, checking the situation out. And this cat may or may not immediately run from you and try to hide. They realize there's probably nothing to fear, but they're not quite sure. So they're going to just hang out and keeping an eye on you. Now, the next, this is from the previous slide, Elliser. This cat is obviously angry and frightened. You'll notice the pupils are large, his ears are flat, there's hissing, his head is lower than his body, and in this situation, he is in the launch position. I don't know if you can tell, but he's on a shelf about chest level, and he's in a corner. And for him to escape, he's either going to have to leap over you, leap at you, or just leap straight down. For cats, the leaping straight down, if you get too close, is not so much an option. So with this cat in this body language, he is in the fight mode at this point. So if you keep pushing it, you can get hurt. So just kind of stay calm. And actually, when your feral cats come in, so I'm assuming most of them, what you're asking is when they come into traps. So we would always take the traps into a back room, sometimes the bathroom. It would depend on what was going on at the day, and we would try to give them at least 5 minutes of calmness while testing them. With that, there are a variety of body language to look for. This is one of them. If they are in this position, be aware. Also, know that just because they're scared doesn't mean they're feral. I know if one of my house cats got out and ended up in a trap, he would probably also be freaking out. One of the guys I used to work with liked to do the pin test, meaning he would reach through and kind of try to touch the cat with a pin, not like poke at it, because of course that's just going to irritate anybody, but try to like put a little pressure in like a pet motion to see what their reaction would be. A fearful cat is normally going to kind of freeze, whereas your feral cats you're going to notice the difference in body language. They're going to be super aware of what you're doing. They usually vocalize and let you know how upset they are and smack at the pin. Again, that's a guideline because every cat is different. I'm also going to include in our resource page on the end some videos for you to watch later to kind of get familiar with what to look for. Angry, hissing, yowling, spitting. This guy actually was a volunteer, and he did not pay attention to Johnny's warning back off, and he actually did almost get bit. Now, he's angry, but he's not frightened. You can tell this by the way his head is above his body, and he's turning away. So he is very clearly giving a warning. He just did not want to be petted right now. But since this guy pushed it, he did almost get bit for his effort. And this kind of just goes over relaxed and calm. Eyes half open, ears up, tail up, laying on side, eye blinks. This is Faith. Isn't she beautiful? You can see she's relaxed and calm. She's about to fall asleep. Her pupils are small. Her ears are erect. Her whiskers are forward. So the body language you're going to want to be paying attention to is their whiskers, their ears, and their tail. Those are going to be your big clues as to what kind of mood these guys are in. And then there's Lola. So laying on side, eyes alert but not scared, ears erect. And as you know, most of these pictures are from our sanctuary, so they're in colony housing rooms, whereas, you know, in the shelter environment, they are going to be in cages. And I also understand it's louder there. You're dealing with things that, you know, our dogs aren't right here on top of the cats, so you're going to have to deal with all that. So in some of the resources I will be sending out, it goes over body language in shelter environments to hopefully help with that. Also be aware that there are always going to be exceptions to every single rule. This is Pipkin. With the body language, you're going to have, those are the basics, yes, and 99.9% of the time that's going to work. You're going to have that exception to the rule. So Pipkin here, isn't she beautiful? You just want to pet her, don't you? Pipkin is actually unpredictable. Based on history of her that we know, she is actually to the point now where we know what we can and can't do with her. But her behavior is not the norm for most cats. She will rub up against you. She's going to purr. She is going to give you every single sign that she wants to be petted, except she doesn't. Hands actually are one of her triggers, and they freak her out. So for us to interact with her, we sit there and we'll put our hands on our hips, and she will pet herself. She has to be in control. And we're not quite sure what happened to her when she was younger, but based on some of the behavior she exhibited in her home, her wires are a little crossed. So she is looking for, she loves to interact with us, but again, on her terms. And one day I did pet her, and I was about 4 full body length pets in, and she's actually an office cat for our animal behaviorist, Dr. Frank. And he said he didn't know which face was better, mine or hers, because we both just kind of were shocked that it was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? She jumped down and we never talked about it again. So be aware, again, everything is going to be guidelines. This is Penelope. She is one of our cases of severe overstimulation. It's going to be especially prevalent in shelter environments because you already have so much going on. Even for, the people that work there, you're trying to do 10 things at once while holding your bladder and not having eaten all day. And so it's not just for the people, but for also the animals, because there's so much going on. So for cats and dogs too, they need a chance to decompress. And for some, you're going to have different triggers. You're going to have to maybe figure out what and how much of the activity can trigger the overstimulation. One of the great examples I like using are laser pointers, because for some cats, they're just like, they're okay. And for some, it actually gets them really, really worked up, but then with no chance of actually catching anything. So it can actually lead to issues later because they have exerted all of this energy in chasing this thing, and then there's nothing to grab and kick and hold on to. So I do recommend, if you're using laser pointers with cats, follow it up with something they can actually physically grab and kick and do motions to. And also, I like to follow it up with a couple of treats. So look, you caught it. Here you go. You get to eat it now. With Penelope, her trigger was actually catnip. You don't see that a lot. Now, kittens under 6 months actually do not react to catnip. This little girl, she could not have catnip. We had to wash her bed separately. Her toys were kept separately, and her neighbor could not have catnip as well, because it led to her actually attacking her tail and doing damage. There was something in her brain. You don't always see it to that extent, but for her it was. So with your enrichment program, you're going to base everything on an individual case-by-case basis, because what works for one cat or what works for 99 of the cats, you're going to have that one or that two where it's like, nope, I'm going to make it hard for you. So just keep that in mind. So with your enrichment program, also monitor everything. She's one that just didn't get catnip, but she was one whose smell was a big part of her life. So with her, we actually had one of the dog trainers come over and teach us scent enrichment that they do with the dogs. So she actually went that way, and she loved it. So here's the baby food I was talking about, the bribery. Using treats to gain trust with these under-socialized cats. It can be baby food, or as well as like any food they're not exposed to, tuna, chicken. I like to start with baby food because it's a lower value treat, whereas tuna is a high value treat. So sometimes if you start with that and then you try to go backwards, they're like, yeah, no, I know where the good stuff is, bring it out. You can intermix with toys as well, depending on the space you have available. The bird, string, and wand toys are fabulous. And for some of our shy kittens, we actually use those a lot because when we introduce, you know, a single kitten into another group and they're kind of nervous and they're kind of wary, once you bring out that wand toy and they start playing, it doesn't matter who's who at this point. They're just running all over each other. And so they're able to intermingle better with the other kittens, but also with us. We've noticed for some of the adults as well, if we can get them focused on something else to where they're thinking about that and not us, we can get them more comfortable in the presence of humans. And this is something you're going to want to do every day with these guys. If possible, you know, as much as you can. Don't extend it over 10, 15 minutes. And at first, kind of go on their body language, because you can't overdo it, meaning they're going to reach a point to where they're just kind of shut down and waiting for you to leave. So anything after that point actually doesn't really count, because they're just, again, waiting on you to leave. So we've had some cats where we literally started with 2 minutes, and you could tell they were just like, okay, that's enough. Whereas now we're up to, you know, 15 and they're fine. Also remember, don't be discouraged by having to take steps back, or because you felt you pushed them too fast. It's going to happen. You know, we're human. We make mistakes, and they're cats, and maybe we misread body language. It's nothing that you can't fix. You know, just kind of back up and go back a few steps and then just start again. So an example I'll use is actually Solomon, and I'll only briefly touch on this because I see we're kind of running low on time, but this was one of the ones untrusting of humans. He was actually found living in a storage facility with other under-socialized cats, and he only saw humans when it was time to eat. So when they actually had to move out and then move in here, his first interactions with people involved going into a carrier, and that was not his favorite thing. Luckily, he was used to people when he ate, so he wasn't totally terrified. But when we first got him, it was because they had to catch him and they had to travel here. So at this point, he was just terrified. But with space and time, he actually started to be kind of more curious about us. And with baby food and temptations, and not us pushing too much, he did come out of his shell quite nicely. And also with the shy cats, if they can spend time with confident cats, because you might not can pet them yet, but if they see you petting other cats and it's like, well, he didn't die and he's not yelling in pain, I guess maybe these humans are not so bad, even if they walk kind of weird on two legs. But he's one we can pet and spend time with now. Here's some tools and techniques. And also trying to figure out feral versus under-socialized. These are going to be important because wand toys give you that distance, because, again, safety first. And I know most state laws, if you have a bite case, you have to house them. In several states, they have to be euthanized. So always be safe, because we also don't want you getting hurt. And use things for a distance. That just talks about baby food. And this was actually what we touched on earlier, when you're making progress, but then you have to be the bad guy. Because you're building a relationship and not forcing it, that's going to help. And another thing you can do is also disguise yourself. We have one caregiver who always ties a bandana around the lower part of his face, and he makes his voice really high when he goes to catch a cat for something, for one of the shyer cats. And for him, it works. They don't associate it with that. Also, when you have to catch them for things like that, medicine, anything, we go at their pace and treat, make it positive. So I'm actually going to go back just a little bit, because I know we need to wrap up. So let's see. So that was back. Here is a resource for harness walking, and that link is also going to be on the resource paper. This talks about clicker training, and it is specifically geared towards shelters because in a home environment, it's so much different. So I'm going to have us watch this, not the whole thing, but enough to get you started. And to get started, if you don't have clickers or if the clicker you think it seems too loud, you can also use like pens that you click or baby food jars, like a Snapple jar that hasn't been opened because they have that little click on them. If for a deaf cat, one time we actually used a camera flash behind our back, and that worked. And that's the great thing about enrichment is, again, there's so many things. If you change it just a little, and it can work, which I just love. And again, nothing has to be super expensive. I love like the actual dollar store where everything's $1 or less. We use muffin tins as slow feeders. And of course you can get stuff off of Amazon as well. But again, when money is a cost and also when time is a cost, we do a lot of our stuff just in our everyday cleaning. So it's not like a huge deal. Like when we're feeding them, it's like, okay, instead of this big bowl, here's like 5 little ones. So you do have to get up and walk for it.
Also on this one, I know the volume, we probably can't hear the video very well, but we'll make sure this gets sent out to everybody so that if you want to get a little bit more about the clicker training and be able to hear really well, this video will be part of that presentation.
Okay, and then I'll go ahead and stop it since you can't really hear, and we will have it for you. I have also attached some stuff from Dr. Sophia Yin, and she goes through and is clicker training kittens. And with clicker training, it's great because physically to exhaust all the animals in your care at a shelter, it's hard because you're going to be exhausted. And they're still like, nope, we can go again. But mental stimulation is just as tiring as physical stimulation. So they still need a physical outlet, but when they have to work for their food or when they have to think, you know, I know after a hard test, I'm like, I could use a nap. So it's the same for them. These are actually 2 of the things I'm going to send out as well, feral versus shy. Because like I said, that can be and it actually is a whole other presentation. So I did want to get some like basics in there, but I know that it's not enough for everything. So here's going to be some resources. And then this is actually, the bottom one is a webinar offered by the ASPCA that talks about it as well. And there's videos in there as well. This is a Google document that I will be sharing that you're going to have access to. And this is just simple shelter enrichment ideas, stuff that's either free or really, really cheap. And it talks about just little things that can be done in your daily time. Because again, I know you're working with not a lot of time and not a lot of budget, if any. So we put together things that you can incorporate into your daily life. So it's not like a big deal, because the easier it is to use, you know, the more people that'll use it. This is actually a checklist. And this is actually what I'm going to challenge y'all to do, like in the next few weeks. So this is a checklist for environmental stressors. So we were talking earlier about going through to all the different areas, all the different cages, and looking at it from a cat perspective. Getting down in the floor, looking out and seeing what do they see, what do they feel. And this is kind of just a checklist that you can do to see, okay, what are some of the stressors that we don't even realize, or what are some of the stressors that we can take away to help these guys be more mentally okay here. And it's going to start with light, meaning provide a predictable light-dark cycle. You know, cut them on in the morning, off at night. And then actually after you do turn them off, kind of stay and see, are there any exit signs that are really loud and obnoxious that maybe you can dim to see kind of what it's going to look like for them. And, you know, not each time somebody enters or leaves a room necessarily. Also, be very aware of noise. And again, I know in a shelter environment, and it's not just cats, it's hard. These are, again, just things to aim for. You know, be kept as quiet as you can, and it says 60 decibels is quiet conversation level. You can actually get this meters on smartphones that you can test. And when you're speaking with cats or in the presence of them, kind of speak lower. House barking dogs as far from cats as possible. Again, I know that's one of your issues you may have, because I know for us, for a while, we had puppies in with cats because they couldn't go with for disease control. So that was something we had to work with. Be aware of just closing doors quietly and avoid sudden and unexpected noises. Now, again, I know it's a working shelter, so you're going to drop stuff. Stuff's going to happen. But be aware of the stuff that you can help with, such as, you know, trash bags being unfolded when you shake it really loud. Maybe not do it in front of the cage. Water dripping. We had, I actually heard from one lady, they used to have a radio on top of their bank of steel cages, and literally those guys always got sick first. They didn't know. It turns out, so the radio on top was irritating the cats, and because they never, if people forgot to turn it off, but it also just made such a weird noise and it echoed that it freaked those cats out. Once they moved the radio off of the cage, they noticed a significant difference in those cats. Be aware of odors from other dogs, cats, hand sanitizers, cigarette smoke, cleaning chemicals, because especially when cats are in cages and they can't get away from it, and they're super sensitive, much more sensitive than we are. So just be aware. Temperature, you know, cats' temps run high. Their normal temps are 101.5 to 103.5, so they prefer it a little toasty. And for you guys who are in the warmer climates, I know because being from South Carolina, it was like, oh, honey, we can't have it 85 degrees in here. So, you know, it may, temperature-wise in the room may not be that. So, you know, make sure they do have bedding or other heating sources. However, if you do use stuff that's plugged in, such as heating pads or even stuff in the microwave, make sure that it doesn't cover the whole bottom. Make sure they can get off of it if need be so they don't get too warm. Another thing is daily routine. And I'm not saying, okay, this has to be done at the same time every day, but there should be like a consistent and predictable to the cat daily routine that's essential. And there should just be a natural progression to the day, meaning you do, like when you come in, you do feeds and meds, and then you clean, and then you work with cats. And that can actually help with your clicker training or your enrichment as well, because if they eat first thing, if clicker training, it goes so much easier if they're food motivated. But if they just ate, they're not going to be as motivated. So if you feed them first thing in the morning and then do clicker training after lunch, they've kind of worked up an appetite. And I know we have one guy who's here. He was actually on My Cat from Hell with Jackson Galaxy. He is the cat that the family called 911 on. And then he went into a foster home, and he just didn't do well there because once he got here, we found out that the couple was retired, so there was no natural progression to the day. Yes, they fed him about the same time, but like the same thing didn't happen around the same time. Like there was no progression. And that's one of his biggest things that he thrives on here, is he knows what to expect next. And for him and his comfort level, that has been a big thing for him, and that we've noticed such a large change in the fact that he just knows what's coming. Also a familiar caregiver. Now, I know that you have to bounce around and with everything, but if they see at least one same person, like here we have people in the same buildings, but then we have floats, because for us in our environment, you know, having the same people is important, but then when we have new faces, they're going to notice little things faster because cats are going to hide illness. So, you know, if a cat's lost 2 pounds, but you see them every day, you don't notice it. But for somebody who only sees them once a week, they're going to notice it. So we could possibly catch illnesses faster, which is super, super important, because then we can either treat it faster or at least be aware. Also familiar objects. You know, when sheltering, 20 years ago, the big thing was you had to take everything out and disinfect everything and put new stuff in and then put the cat back in. You had a lot of mad cats because it's like I spent all night getting my scent all over that and you just messed it up. You just ruined it. And actually that was a big thing with, back then we thought we were doing disease control because we're disinfecting everything, and it actually had the opposite effect. It's actually better if they have familiar objects, you know. So if you don't have to dump their litter every day, and you can just scoop it and dump every other day, or you know, if their bed just has fur but nothing, if you can leave that in there, something that is familiar to them, that's a big help. So what we do at Hope House is we have little pieces of cloth that we put in we hang them like with a shower curtain ring on the front of the cage. So that's like their cloth. They rub on it, they love it, and that goes with them when they travel to a new building. So that's their familiarity that they're taking with them. And, you know, cage setup is very important. And, you know, I know some of the ones I worked with were so small, but you do want to put the food and water as far away as possible from the litter box. And one of the things we've noticed is if you put the litter box in front, that does tend to discourage hiding. Because if it's in the back, they'll kind of use that. And you don't necessarily, you want to give them a different place to hide. So if you have the room, and again, it's not going to be feasible for all cats. For the ones who are, you know, behavior-wise, you're still having issue with, who are kind of darting at you. Of course, those are going to be those exceptions to the rule we talked about, like Ms. Pipkin. But we have found if food and water in the back and the litter boxes up front and they're on opposite sides, that does seem to help. And I do recommend saying, you know, have standardize the cage setup, and then you have your exceptions, because that's going to help kind of make your cleaning just go a little quicker. So hopefully you're going to have more time in your day-to-day things. And also just your basic resources. Is there litter box, fresh food and water, toys, hidey holes, something to scratch on, other enrichments in that cage. So this is just kind of what I'm going to leave y'all with, that I hope in the next week or two, just kind of go through and do a routine check of your shelter just to make sure, and that way we can start with small changes at first.
Thank you so much, Heather. I love this checklist. I love that it's actionable. And thank you for those of you who are able to hang on with us a little bit extra time so she could get to something that we feel like might be a quick first action for you to be able to take, especially in your shelter environment. So look for a follow-up from us with a lot of these resources that you've seen today, as well as access to this checklist, and we'll kick off a discussion in the community for you to be able to share some of the things that you were able to assess and maybe even change or implement based on going through that checklist and doing those assessments. We're going to have another one of these in May and April, and keep going on every third Thursday. The next one is on marketing, so look for more information on that. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Heather. We have a question or two we'll probably send you via email that we didn't quite get to in the chat box. We'll make sure all of that gets taken care of as well. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.